Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston with defeatyourcravings.com. I'm here with a kind-hearted gentleman named Ron, who's agreed to share his experience and strength and hope and wisdom, as well as his trials and tribulations and stumbles and falls. Right, Ron?
Yes, that's right.
So tell me a little bit about your story. Could you give us some background before you found our old program and then the new program, and tell me what happened?
So let me take you to the 2 months before I joined the new program. Those were some of the hardest I've ever faced with binge eating. I was binging about 5 days a week. And when I say binge, I mean well over 10,000 calories each time. And that's being conservative. Every night, I'd promise myself, tomorrow I'll stick to the plan. I'd map out exactly what I'd eat the next day. But by the time the afternoon came, no matter how determined I felt in the morning, I'd already fallen back into the same binging pattern. It felt like I was stuck on a loop that I couldn't break, kind of like the movie Groundhog Day. Not sure if you've ever seen it with Bill Murray.
I have seen that several times.
Yeah, it's pretty good. So just zooming out a little more, my journey with trying to control my weight through diet and exercise, more so diet than exercise for most of the years, began in my teenage years. And now I'm in my mid-40s for reference, so it's been a long road.
Yeah.
Yeah. For me, dieting has always been linked to 3 different buckets, if you will. First, there's the aesthetic side tied to my body image. Then there's the physical health aspect, which became more important to me as I've gotten older. And finally, the mental part of me being in control over my actions. That seemed to spiral out of control as things progressed in my life. Many have struggled with their weight for years. I've tried countless diets, programs, exercise routines, and read dozens of books. Some of those were audiobooks, but that still counts, right?
Definitely still counts.
Very good. So those books ranged from practical diet advice to psychological insights and everything in between. It's a bit ironic, though, that while I was reading all those books on different diets, the real diet I needed was an information diet. I believe you call this the confuse and conquer faulty thought mechanism, where until I discovered the ultimate food plan or the most optimal diet for humans, whatever that might be, I was essentially free to binge as I pleased. So researching different diets was sort of an excuse for me to binge.
Yeah, a lot of people do that.
All this to say that this wasn't my first rodeo when it comes to wrestling with trying to implement healthier habits with food.
Were you having 10,000 calories at a shot your whole life, or just kind of at the apex before you found the program?
So that kind of intense binging behavior really unleashed itself in the last 3 years. But the story begins 5 years ago when I lost about 100 pounds in a span of 4 months, pretty recklessly, and that wasn't sustainable. And that kind of unleashed the superfood monster within.
Got it.
Yeah, kind of like in video games when you get to that final level and you have the final boss and it's the epitome of evil.
You really put yourself in a feast and famine modality and your food monster really came out.
Right. Yeah. Before I joined Defeat Your Craving, it wasn't my first rodeo by any means, but it certainly feels like it is my last now after the tools and strategies that I learned in the program.
How come?
I think it's a mix of factors. At its core, the program really helped me use logical reasoning to break free from the harmful habits I've built around food over the years. And it really helped to gain crystal clarity over what's going on in my head with regards to the urges to binge. So it helped me separate my destructive side, the one that's all about immediate pleasure and impulse, from my constructive side, which appreciates future consequence and cares about my overall well being. The components of that were first me creating my one crystal clear rule and making a sacred vow to honoring it 100% at all times, full stop.
Would you mind sharing it?
Sure. Let me read you the codified version of it.
Okay.
So, my one rule is I will never consume a sweet treat again, excepting for either of the following conditions. One, I'm in a social situation where I choose to indulge in a sweet treat with people I love. Immediate family only social situations excluded. Two, I've planned and or accounted for the sweet treat in my food tracking app at least the night before. And sweet treat is defined as anything sweet where processed sugar is listed as one of the top 5 ingredients.
Got it.
And since starting the program about 4 months ago, I still only have my one rule in place, and it's been like a guardrail keeping my food monster in check. I have not broken it. It was imperative for my rule to not be overly restrictive, and that's something that's highly individualized and going to differ from person to person. My idea of what's overly restrictive might be too loose for someone else, and vice versa. So, really critical to base one's rule on their own personal experiences, preferences, and perhaps experiment with different rules until they land on the one that truly fits.
That's what we figured it out. Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really the beauty of the program. It cannot be overly restrictive by definition because you decide the rule for yourself. So,
People can decide to implement overly restrictive rules, but
right,
we try to guide them not to do that.
correct, right. So the choice is there.
But by choosing yourself, you're leveraging all of your personal experience and knowledge about what works and what doesn't work for you. And the question is, what's the simplest, easiest rule you could follow that wouldn't be too much of a burden, but would still make a big difference?
Exactly.
It's a powerful question to consider.
Right. And that was the winning combination for me personally. Before joining Defeat Your Craving, I did have some experience with your program, but for whatever reason, I decided to make a bunch of rules that I broke out into guidelines now. So while my one rule is like drawing a clear line in the sand, the guidelines, on the other hand, are more about how I eat and the healthier habits I try to stick to. And separating my guidelines from my rules was the game changer.
Just for the benefit of the audience who might not know the difference, in our system, a rule, it's like a bright line in the sand, like a very clear line that you do your absolute best not to cross. But a guideline is just a direction that you point. So my rule might be I'll never have chocolate on a weekday again. A guideline might be I buy organic when it's reasonably possible to do so. So one is really a black and white thing that you can easily tell whether you're following it or not. And the other one is kind of a North Star that you aim for.
Right. So in the past, if I broke one of my guidelines, which at the time were rules, I'd end up breaking all of the rules. Now I realize that that's just what we call a pig squeal in the program, any thought, feeling, or impulse that tries to push one to break the rules and binge. But yeah, I can share some of my guidelines too. Just, I don't know if that's going to be helpful or not.
Please do, sure.
So yeah, my guidelines that, again, it's okay if I don't follow 100% on these, but I do try to, is that I eat 3 meals a day plus a protein snack every day with unlimited fruit and or veggie snacks in between. 2, I gravitate towards whole natural foods for 80% of my meals. 3, when at home, I track my calories and or macros every day using the Chronometer app. I'm not affiliated with that app. That's just one of the many macro tracking apps that are available. 4, I engage in resistance training, which is just a fancier way of saying lifting weights, a minimum of 3 times a week, and cardiovascular training lasting 3 minutes twice a week. And number 5, I aim for 8,000 steps per day. So those are my health-related guidelines. And I would say that I was probably 95% of the time adhering to them. So it worked out pretty well there.
Good. What were the other game changers that really helped you in the program?
So I think the practice of refutations was something completely new to me that I did not practice prior. So Refutations really allowed me to dismiss the pig squeals or urges to binge at the moment that they popped up. And in the early goings of the program, I would also practice refutations at the beginning of each day, even when I didn't feel like binging, just to sharpen that skill set and be prepared for the days when motivation was lower and the urges to binge reemerged. And boy, am I happy that I did that. I can share a little story about my extinction curve.
Please.
I'll define the extinction curve. It's the process that describes how conditioned responses, like craving for chocolate croissants at nighttime, for example, diminish over time when the expected reward, the chocolate croissant, is no longer provided. So, in a sense, it's the journey that we take when we try to extinguish a craving or a bad habit. So, initially, the cravings will intensify, and this is known as the extinction burst, before they start to gradually decrease. Now, after a period of time when somebody is not providing the reward, there is a surprise, and this happened to me. So 3 months after not breaking any of my rules, I experienced what's known as a spontaneous recovery. So the spontaneous recovery occurs after a period of extinction when the conditioned response reemerges, even though the behavior has not been reinforced. So despite me successfully managing my cravings up to a point, I suddenly experienced a very intense urge to binge 3 months into it. And that really caught me by surprise. But the practice of refutations allowed me to not give in to the cravings at that point and restart the extinction curve all over again, or at least set me back a little bit.
How did you handle it?
I basically, at the moments of urges, I did a refutation every time. And that lasted only 3 or 4 days and subsided. And again, I've not had any really strong urges to binge for quite a while now. So
Beautiful.
since I started the program 4 months ago, I lost about 20 pounds. So roughly a pound and a quarter per week, which at my weight is less than 1% of body weight loss per week.
But that's fine. It's only 4 months, so we want you to go slowly.
Absolutely. And that wasn't even the main focus for me with the program. I was not after fat loss. I understand fat loss. It's numbers for me. It's very clear cut. But I really wanted to get control over my eating. And that was my first priority. The weight loss was the byproduct.
Was there anything besides the refutations that helped you? Or was that the biggest deal?
As far as the strategy, yeah, that and the separation from my urges, I guess, and what I really want from food. But as far as the program itself, the daily coaching calls were just amazing.
The group support calls every day?
Yeah, as well as my private coaching with my coach, amazing coach, Fiona.
So you really took advantage of everything.
Yes, that's key, to kind of immerse yourself in the universe. I feel right now like that I should keep myself in, and sometimes I feel guilty if I don't show up to as many coaching calls. But
we don't want you to feel guilty, but they are there to help you when you want them.
Absolutely. I wanted to share another thing that really surprised me. I took this program during the summer months, and notoriously summers for me have been very tough with staying on plan with eating due to a lot of vacations, holidays, and the kids being off from school and eating out. This summer, I had a stretch of maybe 6 weeks where I had multiple weddings and occasions and a huge trip for 10 days where a large chunk of it was spent on a cruise ship. And for those who don't know, a cruise vacation is kind of like the Food Monsters food festival 24/7. So
it's a big pig party if you're not careful.
Right. And that was still earlier on in the program for me. And I handled it without breaking my one food rule. Not only did that happen, but I came back from the trip having lost 5 pounds. So
wow.
A real shocker for me. Every time I go away or I go to a restaurant and I don't have that wrestling with what should I eat and, am I going to go off right now and just eat everything on the menu kind of thing, that still feels surprising. So,
Ron, you're doing terrific. Is there anything that you wanted to ask me?
No, I think just to say thank you for the program.
Thank you for being vulnerable and sharing this with everybody. I appreciate you.
Me too.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.